Hey, time for another PBR Monday. We got a great guest tonight. He's already waiting in the wings, and I'm going to bring him in after just a few minutes. Give the room a little bit of time to populate here. As always, if you come in through the Tour of Idaho Facebook page, make sure you give StreamYard your credentials so that I'll know who you are when you make a comment. If you come in through YouTube and or the Motorcycle Jazz Facebook page, it might be best if you just put your name at the end of your comment so I know who you are. It sometimes doesn't pick that stuff up. I can see we got people rolling in tonight. We're going to have Dylan Knight on, number 93, in a few minutes. Before we get going with Dylan, though, a little bit of housekeeping, some announcements. We have a team out today. They started this morning, and they got a righteous early start, 3:30 in the morning. That's when they passed over the freeway anyway. They probably left Malad about a half an hour earlier, so it looks like maybe a 3 a.m. departure from Malad. They did the challenge section. A bit curiously, they rode part of the way down Bob Smith Canyon before they turned around and just stayed on the challenge section. They had to do Reed because they were a three-person team, and they had pre-ridden some of the route. They're kind of local guys. But they're doing pretty well. They just finished Robbers Roost. They did it challenge section style, so they did it from east to west, and they're now working their way up the Boundary Trail. Looks like they passed the ski area, and they're on their way up to Incan Pass right now. So the over-under in those guys was like 8 o'clock. I think the over is going to win. I think they'll probably be here at 9 or 9:30, somewhere around through there. They still have a little ways to go, and this time of the day, they're probably starting to feel a little bit gassed. So if I were them, I'd take it easy. And 9:30, somewhere through there is probably where we'll see them come rolling through. And I'll try to talk to those guys sometime tomorrow. Now, some announcements. As I have mentioned several times in broadcasts and on PBR Mondays, next year is the last year of the tour. And I told everybody it was going to be an invitation-only event. Hello, Ralph. Hello, Spencer. Spencer and those guys are on next week. So we have Team DFT are going to be my guests next week, and I can't wait to talk to those guys. That was an epic Tour of Idaho right there. But anyway, so next year, invitation only, but that doesn't mean nobody's going to get invited. It just means that we're going to screen people for next year. And as I've mentioned several times, you're going to have somebody that I know vouch for you, or if I know you, I'll vouch for you. But we are going to have some screening. We're only going to limit teams, though, by the number of days, hello, Richard, in the tour, which is, 45 to 50, somewhere through there. So there's going to be room for lots and lots of teams. So that's not the problem. The problem is we are going to screen, and if you can't convince me or somebody who knows me that you have the ability to make a deep run at the tour, where you won't get an invitation. Now, we haven't exactly come up with the criteria yet, and every day I get DMs about this. Please accept my invitation. And some of those people I will. The few people that I've already signed off on are people that I personally know. They've been in the wings for a long time, or they made a good try a few years ago and they want to come back one last time. I already told those people okay, but that's a handful of teams, no more than a half a dozen. But I anticipate we'll fill the schedule next year because it's the last year. But I'm not going to do anything about that right now. I'm going to wait till tour season's over. I'm going to talk to the folks on the 2023 steering committee, which I've already started assembling, and I'm going to come up with what is a fair and righteous criteria, and then I'll announce it. And you won't have to do anything right away. There will be a series of deadlines, but I can't anticipate you having to do anything any sooner than the first of the year. So we have plenty of time to sort all this stuff out. Because we're going to limit teams to one a day, I anticipate there will be a little bit of a miniature gold rush for, getting the date you want. You might want to count on the fact you might not get the date you want. And I'm going to give I have some teams that I'm going to give first shot at those dates. Teams I've already pre-screened, and I think those folks are fairly automatic. I'm going to give them the first shot. And after we go through that, that's about a half a dozen, maybe a dozen teams. We'll open it up to everybody else. So I think there's a good chance, as long as you can ride and you're okay, I think you'll probably get in next year. What we want to screen for, though, is anytime something becomes scarce, it's everybody wants a piece of it. It's like toilet paper a couple years ago during the pandemic. I saw adults fighting over toilet paper in the aisles of the local Fred Meyer store. It was ridiculous. So we're going to have this land rush next year to get in on this last thing, and I don't want people that have no prayer, which is about 50% of the teams that used to be about 80% of the teams that showed up. Excuse me, in the last few years, it's been a little bit less than half. The last few years, those of you who are out there in our community have done a really good job of sort of spreading the word that this is the real deal. I think these PBR Mondays help. I think Dylan tonight is going to help that. I know DFT will help that next week. So we're starting to get better people that show up. But every year we still get a lot of people that show up that, don't make it through day one, or if they do, they make it barely through, and then they get blasted somewhere deeper in the tour. I just don't want to deal with that next year. I want to make sure that everybody that shows up that takes a spot on that schedule has a realistic shot of getting through. So we'll come up with some fair way of doing that, and but I'm not going to do it right now. We'll do it later on. The other thing is that I mentioned really briefly a couple weeks ago that because next year is the last year, a number of tour vets have reached out to me and said, well, I'd like to do it again. Well, I think that's great. I'd like to see you again, especially since this is the last time. And after next year, this thing becomes a legacy route. Then it'll be just like, the CAT or every other big motorcycle route out there. There'll be a map, and I might occasionally make some changes to it. But, we're not going to track people, no more jersey numbers or anything like that. The route will still exist. You can still go do it, but everybody will do it at a T2 style, which means you can do whatever the heck you want. So you can have full support. You can take 3 days to do one of the days we do now. I was talking to a tour vet who called me about an hour ago, and in a way, it's the right time to do this. Other than the fact that I need to move on and do some other things, it's the right time to do it because increasingly technology is making it very, very difficult to ensure the adventure integrity of something like this. A fellow named Charles Rhodes, a guy who was on Team Utah a few years ago, unfortunately had to drop out in Chalice, sent me something the other day about how T-Mobile is working on linking their network with satellites, specifically Starlink, so your cell phone will work anywhere. There's no place on the planet that your cell phone won't work. Well, there will be some places because Starlink doesn't cover everything, but in most places, it's going to work. And in any place like the continental United States, your cell phone's going to work. You'll be able to get high-speed data anywhere, talk to anybody anywhere. No need for a sat phone anymore. The more things like that come up, the harder it is to sort of ensure the adventure integrity of something like this, and by that I mean keeping the level of adventure high. And Dylan's going to talk to you about that tonight a lot. You're out there by yourself. You're in the middle of nowhere. There's something to that does something inside of your head. I have to rely on myself here. There's nobody can come and get me very fast. I can't really talk to other people except through this PLB. When I was talking to this tour vet that called me earlier, I told him that was kind of the moment that I sort of became disinterested in climbing, when all of a sudden, when you're doing your El Cap route, you can have a pizza delivered to your bivouac up in Camp 4 in the nose if you want to. You can dial it in and somebody will lower it to you on a rope. I kind of lost interest in climbing at that point because it wasn't the sport that had excited me decades earlier, when the concept was you drive 300 miles down a dirt road somewhere. You get in an airplane on a dirt strip. They fly you another 300 or 400 miles into a little pond in the backcountry somewhere. Your directions to the pilot are come back in 30 days. If I'm not here, fly over a couple more days about the same time and then call my family. No sat phones, none of that kind of stuff. The adventure integrity of something like that is really high because you just don't have any options. If you get hurt, you better know first aid, and you better not get hurt. So with the world becomes a smaller place the more modern technology overtakes everything. And so after a while, it just becomes very, very difficult to ensure the integrity of something like this, the adventure integrity of something like this. So I think it's the right time to move on. Just put the route out there and let people enjoy it at their own terms. But all of you who have done this, And it doesn't, especially those of you who earned a jersey number, you know what you did, and it's always going to stay with you. You know exactly what you did, and it's a special thing that you got to experience in your life, and we'll just leave it at that. And I'm very, very happy with that outcome. That right now, if we count DFT, I haven't completely finished with their tracks yet, but what I've looked at so far, it looks to me like we're up around, let's see, 96. So 4 more people, we're going to be up around 100. I know that we won't get there this year. We might get to 99 this year, but we won't get to 100. But sometime next season, we'll cross that 100 threshold, and I think that's a good place to sort of transition to the next great thing. So next year, I'm going to have some rules for tour vets that are different than the current rules. If you're a tour vet, you've already earned your jersey number, and you want to come back. What I'm thinking about doing, here we go. See, there we go. That's what happens when you put it back out there on YouTube. You got to block people again. So let's see. There we go. All right. Hopefully we can, that person has people friend me every day. It's out of control. But anyway, hello, Jake. Hello, Brian. Let's see. I already said hi to Richard. So next year, if you're a tour vet, we're going to have a different set of rules for you. They're going to be relaxed rules because I think you already did what you needed to do to earn your jersey. So what I want you to be able to do is to come back and enjoy the tour on your own terms. You've already earned your jersey number, so you got nothing left to prove anyway. Come back and have some fun. Bring your family, bring your kids, show them a little bit about what you did. And the thing that got me going was talking to this guy a little earlier, and he talked about how he did just a couple of days of the tour this year with some friends of his. And they did it sort of in semi-tour style. He, more than anything else, just wanted to sort of introduce them to it and show them what it was all about. And I think that's marvelous. I think that's a great idea. Those guys got a taste of what it's like. They're not out to earn a jersey number. And this guy got to relive a little bit of his personal history, which was great. So we're going to do something like that next year and make it official. If you're a tour vet, you want to come back, and you want to bring other people with you, we're going to relax the rules and let you do it whatever way you want. No jersey numbers are going to be given out for anything like that, but we will acknowledge that you're coming, and I'll really look forward to seeing you. That's one of the reasons I want to do it. I hope that as many of you come back as can next year. Hello, Brian. So, I want to, without any further, let's bring in my guest here. There he is, the man of the hour, Dylan Knight. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great, Martin. Glad to be on here. It's been exciting last week and a half or so since I wrapped up the tour.
Well, you were on earlier, if I'm not mistaken, right? We had you on a little bit before. Is that correct?
We've so the very first time I ever came on, it was on 2 years ago when I had made my first attempt at the Tour of Idaho with my then partner, Stuart Schiff. And that was in 2020. And we had, on day 2, come in for an interview. And we had a good one, but it never recorded. So we ended up never getting.
Oh, that's right.
And then last year, you had Stu on as a guest. And I came on with him. And we had an interview then. So that was talking about my 2020 attempt.
That's right. All right. So same thing we do for everybody then. Tell us a little bit about, talk to us a little bit about your first attempt, the thing that motivates you to come out here and beat yourself with a bag of hammers for 13 days. And then let's just go through day by day your trip this year. Tell everybody all about it. One of the most compelling trips, everybody in the whole tour community agrees that soloists get the most props because it's the hardest on soloists. And, being one of the first people through as a soloist is a pretty stellar accomplishment in everybody's view. So it's all yours. Take the floor.
Okay. So my name is Dylan Knight. I'm from the East Coast, specifically North Carolina, which was, when I had my first attempt at the tour, I lived out west a little bit, but it was definitely hard to say that the practice and riding I'd done in the East Coast was comparable to the types of riding and stuff that you show up to ride on day one for the Tour of Idaho. But I'm from North Carolina and just recently moved to the Portland with my girlfriend, and going to be here for 5 years. So anybody that rides in the West and in this area, I'm open to meeting. Need new riding partners. And so this year in 2022, I'm going to state right out of the gate that I was part of a two-man team with one of my best friends, Jake Hines, who he's a riding buddy that I rode with in North Carolina for the last couple of years. And as soon as I got done with my 2020 Tour of Idaho attempt, he was initially the, obvious choice of person that I would want to take as a candidate or a partner in for the 2022 attempt that I was kind of starting to plan for. So to go back in 2020, Stuart Schiff and I made an attempt on the Tour of Idaho, and then it was a 10-day tour. We worked through, all kinds of, we were somewhat surprised at how hard the Tour of Idaho was. We were not quite prepared mentally for what it was going to take, and how, long and how much of an endurance event it turned into. At first, when I was starting to plan for the Tour of Idaho, I was thinking about bringing a fly rod. Because I knew that we were going to cross so many good creeks and streams. I was literally considering throwing a little ultralight fly rod in the bag, like I would have time for that. Needless to say, day one was hit hard, and we realized that it was going to be a pretty significant challenge for the next 10 days. So Stuart and I worked through a bunch of challenges. We had mechanical issues. We had days where we had navigation challenges. We got in late. We rode off of side hills. We, we were shaking in our boots at the terrain that we were going through, and managed to, for me, hold it together for 6.5 days. So on day 7, I was halfway through the day. I just had a wheel bearing that disintegrated, and we, just like you say, Martin, if you bring too much stuff, you're sure you're going to need it. And we had a lot of stuff with us that trip, packed somewhat too much. It turned out that the set of wheel bearings I had did help me, and I was able to pound out and replace an old worn out or a blown out wheel bearing on the rear wheel with the new one. Managed to keep going right on Windy Ridge, which or not Windy Ridge, Henderson Ridge on this tour's day 10. Then it was day 7, and just shortly thereafter I smashed my hand on a downfall that broke. It only broke one finger, but my hands swelled up like a balloon pretty quickly, and I had really quickly was able to decide that it was unlikely I was going to be able to keep going for 3 more days with Stu. So I ended my tour, and he kept going solo for the next 2 or 3.5 days, and he finished in 2020. So it just so happens that was 6.5 days in to the 2020 attempt, which was exactly halfway through the 13-day Tour of Idaho this year. So I basically had only done a half trip. So this year's trip definitely turned out harder in terms of length, and then also for the other circumstances, which I'll get into, was also tough. But so that was 6.5 days in. Stu managed to pull it together. I got help from another Tour of Idaho advocate and follower and potential person that might attempt it next year, David Hopewell, who was just the right person in the right time and he
Good dude.
offered me a ton of help. And
Yep.
even since, I've gone and met up and ridden with him, and he was cheering me on, like, you know, one of, the my own team. So he was cheering me on, and he's been a big advocate for my success for the last this 2022 attempt too. So just another person that makes this tour of Idaho so cool. So this year I rode with Jake Hines, and we started in coming from North Carolina, having ridden a bunch together. And we rode the types of trails that we have back east, which are tough, challenging trails, but they are very, very different in terms of the way they're built. They're, a 5,000 acre parcel that has trails wiggling all through it in a pattern that is designed to generate a lot of mileage in a small acreage. And it's very, very different than how things work out on the public lands, where the trails traverse the landscape and they're actually designed to get you from one point to another. And it's hard to, again, to compare or, prepare for the riding that we were doing in the Tour of Idaho from North Carolina. So it's somewhat surprising, and every time you show up out west without really much transition riding in between. So should I talk about how this year's trip went?
You talk about, you got the floor. I'm not even going to ask you questions or anything. I want you just to one thing I want to talk about, though, is I want to compliment your partner, Jake.
Yeah.
That dude's an athlete, man. That guy is an absolute stud. Yeah. I don't know how he rides or anything, but when I looked at that guy, he looks like he doesn't have an ounce of body fat on him. Looked like he could pretty much take a motorcycle and huck it over the barn. He looked like he was a fit rascal.
Yeah. Well, he was prepared physically for the Tour of Idaho, and that was, there were all kinds of things that we could control in what we were doing to prepare. And Jake was fit. He's mentally the toughest person I think I know. We had some days that, or specifically day 3, which really, really cool. And it whooped our butts. There were a lot of things that made day 3 tough, but I saw Jake working harder than and he said it specifically. The guy's like into CrossFit and all kinds of working out, and he's tough, he's strong, he's fit. And he said that day 3 was the hardest workout he's ever had in his life. And it was true. I absolutely looked at his face, and he looked as exhausted as I've ever seen. But
did you see the pictures I posted up the other day? I went back in there the other day and wrote it again.
Oh, you wrote it?
I wrote it again. I wrote it in and out. And wow. So I wrote it both ways. And man, I got out and I just said, I think I can go the rest of my life without doing that again.
It was fun, and how tough it was actually a fun challenge. But it beat us up at the end of a long.
Oh God, yeah. I apologize for that too. The second part doesn't ever get any easier. But when I wrote it last fall, I wrote it at the end of October, and that creek that you ride up it didn't exist. When I wrote it, my feet still hurt. I got trench foot from walking in water, like pushing my bike up over tree roots and stuff. My feet got soaked, and I got an infected toe right now. I'm walking around with a limp. And when I did that last October, all that was dry as a bone. You could motor ride up it. There were a couple of slabs I had to kind of work my bike over. There's a couple places where there's some slabs you got to climb up. Yeah. And so the only part that really bothered me were the Erzberg boulders. You do those gnarly little switchbacks up there. Then there's that Erzberg boulder field, which is only a couple of 100 yards long. It looks worse than it is once you get into it. I'd been there before. So when I got there this time, I'm going, well, it's not that far. And you
Well,
can
we were
actually, if you know where to look, you could see the quad trail you're going for. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's true. We were definitely laughing and laughing at your gauge of distance, mile and a half. We should have known better. As soon as we heard you say it's about a mile and a half, we should have perked up and recognized that was 2, 3, 4 miles. It felt like of the last uphill. Was pretty bumpy, I'd say, but the real tough stuff up in that rocky cauldron
Yeah.
was pretty fun too. But
The best part about that too is you do the first part, which we refer to. So Michael Knight named it the devil's butthole up at top, and I named the part below that the devil's ureter, which I think is perfectly appropriate. And in between the devil's ureter and the devil's butt crack, there's that nice meadow you go through, and you get in that meadow and you go, oh, I'm saved. Salvation is here. I'm going to church next Sunday. And then right above that, you start the Erzberg section. It's hilarious what it does to you.
Yeah. Speaking of Michael Knight, I've got no relation. Not that I have any reason not to. Just everybody thinks I'm related to him, but I'm not. So I'll start back. Day one, Jake and I, we linked up. He is coming from the East Coast. I had just come from Oregon, where I just had moved to. We linked up in Pocatello, dialed our gear in for the first day, put a saw on his bike, which I had with me, and he'd been getting his saw rigged up. Yeah, that's right, Benjamin Martin Miles. That's a good word for him.
It's a mile and a half.
Mile and a half. And we got out on day one, and Jake was mentally prepared for how long of a day it was, and physically he was prepared, and I was more aware in my head of what a day like that feels like. The only thing I can really compare it to is my attempt at the Tour of Idaho in 2020, and that was definitely helpful to me. I pared my gear down quite a bit, and went with kind of the prescribed baggage that people that tend to be successful have on their bikes, and I rode with fewer items and was thinking constantly about when to fill up with fuel and when to have less weight on the bike, and all those things that were a learning curve for me on the first attempt. It was a much more smooth process for me this year, so that helped quite a bit. But day one, we had a long day and managed to pull it off and get in at like 10:30. We started at 3:30 or so, or 3 maybe even, and got in at 10:30. Tired, grateful for the half day the following day, and got a Applebee's, steak and potatoes dinner at midnight basically. Next morning, day two went pretty smooth. We didn't get new tires in day two, and it ended up that was one thing that generated a little bit of challenge later on towards the ends of day 3 and 4 for us. But day 2 was just what it was supposed to be. A pleasant ride in the afternoon. We had racked up 2 bonus points after that. So we've gotten 1 on day 1 and 1 on day 2, and that was something that turned out helpful for us later on in the trip. And then day 3, we got a real early start, and we had some rainstorm and windstorm that came through the night of, and it was shaking the room we were in, and it felt like we were going to get lifted off the ground. And it brought some rain in, which kept the desert at least a little bit less dusty, which was helpful. We got to American Falls, and Jake had a custom headlight that he had built for to work around the saw, which he was carrying on his bike. And we found some air issue going on with his headlight the night before, thought we had fixed it, and this problem showed up again at about 4 a.m. in American Falls. So we stuck out and burned about an hour of our early start tinkering on something that was nothing to do with his wiring. It was honestly something that probably had been generated by the previous owner of the bike. And we traced out a short, zip tied or wired it, nutted it back together, and we're back on the road within an hour. Um, Went through the mystery section, which the special nav was a blast. We had a lot of fun. We hadn't done too much thinking about how everything was going to work because it was kind of vague how exactly things would work. But I take that back. It wasn't vague. It was just we knew that it was going to turn out to be easier to figure out in the moment than it was trying to come up with every scenario that we could generate sitting at home working on a computer, thinking about all the ways that we would tackle the problem. And once you gave us the information and how it was laid out, it worked really smoothly. It was a ton of fun. And after about the first couple instructional waypoints, we started to understand how you were putting it together, and it made a lot of fun in the desert, getting around. So we pretty efficient, zigzagged through the desert, and saw some of the cool terrain. Jake got to ride sand, which was new to him. I've taken a trip to Baja, so I've had a little bit of sand experience. That was news to, another odd terrain feature that was a fun one for both of us to get to play in for the morning. And then we made our way up to Big Southern Butte, had a good time to get up there. Took a giant panoramic photo and saw, you can see, feels like 100 miles in, a couple directions. And you can see way north in the direction you're headed. And that was pretty cool. We went down, and this was another thing that I remembered from my 2020 tour attempt, was how challenging it might be to get food. Things don't go right. Getting food, which I need a lot of it. I can just pound, a bunch of food. And when I get done with a big day of exertion, if I don't get food, my stomach turns into a black hole and it starts caving in on itself. And I needed enough food that I was planning ahead. And so we'd go into these towns, and I'd call ahead and ask for a to-go order of, 4 16-inch subs. And we'd eat a whole 16-inch sub on the spot and then put a whole sub in our backpack. And we would just shove one in our mouths and just pound it away. And then we'd have a whole sub in our backpack. And sometimes we'd get into town and have time for a meal wherever we were going. But on day 3, it turned out we didn't. And I was grateful that I had an entire sub in my pack. So we took back off, and we ended up in at the end of the known navigation section.
Waypoint 99, yeah.
Waypoint 99, and we started our nav history section. And just about that time, you can see the curtains of rain falling in the distance, and you can tell that you're dodging rainstorms, but you're not sure whether you're going to end up in one or not, or if you're going to end up where a rainstorm just was, even if it's dry at the moment. And just about the time we started to get up into the mountains, we knew that we had a challenging trail right ahead of us. It started to drizzle, and Jake and I were expecting that Erzberg mile and a half, and we kind of battened down the hatches and got our gear ready, and we planned to, we knew it was going to be a tough section, and that was about 5 in the afternoon, so probably later than it should have. We didn't have too many navigational challenges, so we ended up there riding a pretty consistent pace, and we rode our ride, and 5 o'clock was when we showed up, and it wasn't due to much other than just the speed that we rode. And we got into the great single track. We were surprised, thinking that maybe the Erzberg mile and a half was yet, something that it was going to come later on. And then we ended up in it, and we knew when we were in it. Well, we thought we did. We at first we realized that we had yet to reach it, but we thought we were in the middle of it, and that's why it was 5 miles, not a mile and a half in your head. So Jake and I both were pushing through tough terrain. The bikes were heavy, and the trail had been rained on. It was slippery and wet, and we were nervous that we were going to have to go over creek crossings, that the creek was going to be flooded, and so we definitely were anxious to work our way through it. And it turned out that we kept plugging through it, but it started draining our energy quickly. Just tipping the bikes over and having to pick them back up and lose your momentum. And that was a section that really tested our riding ability, and it was demanding and physically strenuous, and it pushed both of us really, really far. But Jake was having as tough a time as me, plus a little from the chainsaw and the terrain just being slippery. His bike was tipping over a few times that no matter what was going on, he would lift that thing back up and keep pushing through sections that were, it was just like pretty incredible effort that we, had to push through to get in through that section. Managed to get through it, and Jake told me it was the toughest workout he'd ever had in his life. And I've seen the guy, run crazy fast mile times followed by 50 pull-ups and 100 push-ups, and he's fit as can be, but it just was a different level of strain than we had been used to. And so we got to the top of that trail, took a little breather, got up to a point where we were going to send you a challenge photo, and in my head and his head both, we were thinking that we had maybe another 45 minutes or an hour, and it was probably 8 o'clock at that time, and we were wrong. We were very wrong about how much more we had, but that was the start of what was supposed to be the best single track we'd ever ridden in our lives. That was what we were expecting. And as soon as we got up high on this peak, I saw just kaboom! Lightning bolt strikes, like half a mile off in the distance, which looks very close. And we had just put rain gear on, and I told Jake on the radio, I was like, let's get down quick. And we turned and we started riding, and then for the next 4 hours, it was monsooning on us. And it was slow because we had some errors in traction, and we'd get stuck on a hill and we'd ride back down and then manage to get up it. But the single track was great. It was just under an inch of water.
Yeah.
And so we ended up back in a hotel we would have been there around 12:30 if we had a little bit of trouble in the last part of the navigation, and ended up in the hotel late, like around 3:30. And that was a tough time to get in and just strip off all of our soaking wet gear. And we thought that the showers were going to be hot, but they had plumbed them backwards. And so the shower was plumbed backwards, which I didn't have the brain cells to, of course, it's happened to me before, but I didn't have the brain power left to just try the other direction. And so I took a cold shower at 3:30.
Oh.
Which Jake and I were both just needed sleep. And so we got into bed, and it was normally we would be trying to start around 4:30 in the morning, but we slept in till 6. And so we got up at 6 and we started riding again. And I think we ate the last of our 16-inch subs that morning, and started on day 4, which Jake had woken up and I had woken up, and we were stiff. And talk about trench foot. We had all of that going on. And in fact, I don't think our feet dried out until the morning of day 5, basically. But we got through the morning, and once the morning of day 4 started, we had some really great terrain, and that was such a blast. Such a blast to ride the single track that um, was in that same area, and we had better conditions because it was now dry and blue-blurred skies, um, and a little bit of moisture was great for traction. So we had a really good morning, pushed through day 4, and we uh, rode some of that terrain that Jake and I were both just like looking at our surroundings, and from a couple of guys from the East Coast, it's just incredible to see, and it's huge landscapes. Hard to tell people what it's like riding through this stuff. It's really hard to describe, and Jake, I tried to tell him and tried to talk to him about how incredible the landscape is, and the terrain and the trails and how they're built and how narrow they can be, and nothing quite feels the same until you're on it. And it was really fun to ride with him, and see his reaction to what the riding's like out west. So we had a blast on day 4, but late in the day, we were just on a lot of that rocky terrain where you kind of are on like an old dozed grade that's cut on the side of a rocky slope, and a lot of loose boulders, and some stuff is just cemented in place. But no matter what, it's just a lot of jolting and straining on your body, and it started to aggravate something that had been tweaked yesterday. Jake had one of the many times that the bike got loose, had bumped something on Jake's arm and started to get aggravated and tweaked, and it started swelling up, and his wrist turned into a bad problem by the end of day 4, and it was getting to the point where he couldn't barely hold on to the bars, or pull his brake levers in, and control his throttle, and it ended up that at the end of day 4 we made it in around 10, and Jake had kind of kept his mind straight on getting through the day until at the end of day 4 he kind of recognized that it was low likelihood that he felt like he was going to be able to keep going for another 9 days, and made the decision that we would decide he was going to retire on his attempt. And we I'd gone through it in my head with Stuart before, and it was a reverse scenario where I had hurt my hand, and I had told Stuart that it was going to be the end of my tour, and that I know it's unlikely that it's not what you decided you were coming here for, to ride a solo tour attempt, but if you wanted to keep going, it was going to turn into a solo attempt. And so we had that quick discussion, and it turned into just swapping gear over for a minute. And we had called in for 4 pizzas, and so we had 4 pizzas that night. One went into my backpack, and one we ate an entire pizza, and then I put an entire pizza into my backpack. And these weren't little personal pizzas either; they were big ones. So yeah, that was tough to deal with Jake. That it was something that I hadn't planned for, and hadn't really comprehended what it was going to be like to go on solo, just because all of the thought process that you work through is designed on 2 people, and turned into a solo attempt on day 5. So I woke up the morning and waited out a quick storm, and then got up into the mountains and had a beautiful sunrise, and it turned into a really nice moment. I paused for a minute and watched the sun coming up, and out of Mackey, and it just felt like everything was in a good place. And I was bummed about being solo and Jake not being able to keep going on. But everything was looking like I was, prepared to keep it up. So I was going to make a big push. And day 5 went pretty well. I ended up getting a tire in Haley, made it to Smoky Bar Store, and had one of the cool things that I actually did on day 5 too was that in my 2020 attempt, I had lost a bolt out of my kickstand on my KTM, and it had been rattling around, and I had taped it up to something on the bike, and I wasn't able to use a kickstand for the last couple of days, and I managed to find somebody I scavenged a kickstand bolt from and catch them. And I had, after the tour on 2020, I had talked to him and initiated a little, I sent him a part back and repaired the parts that I had taken from his bike. Well, I went back by his house and knocked on his door and said hey to him on the way through this time. And he was excited to hear from me again and see me. And he had heard of the Tour of Idaho, which was another scenario where I was, I'm surprised every time that when I'm out there riding, how many people had actually heard of the Tour of Idaho. But he had heard of it and filled my water up and wanted to chat for longer than I had. But it was cool to see that same person again and interact. So day 5 was fun, and I had a little bit more time than I normally might have, and got to see Kaylin and had elk stroganoff for dinner and a huge pile of food. That was one of the only nights where I think I might have maybe consumed more calories than I burnt. And so that was a good day. And it was just a beautiful setting and pretty cool. So that was fun to see Kaylin. Day 6, I rode through the morning, and I was on guard because the morning of my day 6 this year was our morning of day 4 previously. And Stuart and I had come to the conclusion that every day we need to get an early start because it was the only thing that keeps us from saving our day when things go wrong. And if you get an early start and everything goes perfect, and you get in early and you get a lot of sleep and things are good. But if something goes wrong, it's the only thing that can save your day and keep you from falling behind. So we had gotten an early start in 2020 and left and started to ride over Snowslide. In about the first 2 miles from Kaylin's, or maybe it was the first 4 miles, basically the first half mile of single track, we had a side hill incident, and we spent all of the 2 hours that we had gotten up early to
that's a bare side hill too. It'd be really hard to find a way to winch your bike back up.
Oh, we were ripping sagebrush and pulling boulders downhill, and everything we tried to anchor to kept coming down. So we finally managed to get the bike back on the trail, and burnt all the morning that we had left early. But I don't know, if it happened at sunrise, it would have been 2 hours later into our day. So day 6 was good. I woke up feeling pretty strong with a fresh tire, and had a really good day. No mistakes getting into Chalice, and got some food, and things went pretty smooth. And my body was hurting and things were uncomfortable, but I felt like I had a pretty good grasp on the scenario. And then I woke up day 7, and day 7 started off just something about it. I felt less motivation, lower energy, and I felt like I was riding slow, and just reading into the route description for the day, I was expecting that by the time I reached highway, was it 93?
93.
That I was going to be halfway through the day, and I was aiming for 6 to 7 hours to do it. And some of what I was coming up with was from numbers that I had looked at Scott's Scott's PLB tracks, and Scott's tracks would show, some rough ideas on times, and I was kind of comparing myself to how fast he was riding things, and I definitely was in a position where I was using the fact that Scott had gone before me as some mental power to push through and to compare myself as to how my day would maybe go. And so I ended up riding a couple of those bonus sections and getting to Highway 93 later in the day than Scott had, and later in the day than I had hoped to. And while I was up at one of those bonus sections, I had started to have some bad thoughts in my head about what I was doing out there, and the level of energy in my headspace was I started to question, do I want to do this again? I was 6.5 days in, on halfway through day 7, and I was halfway through the tour, and in my head it was really hard thinking about, I had gotten away from that thought process of just bite off little chunks, and I was thinking about it as I have a whole nother chunk the same size as what I've done ahead of me alone. And I started to think about the whole process in the wrong light, and it became kind of daunting. And I had called all of my, I called Jake to talk to him. I called my girlfriend and my father and Stuart, my old Tour of Idaho partner. And I had asked him, and told him that I'm not sure I'm going to be keeping on going. I thought that I might turn north and just head straight into Salmon and not do that mystery section. And all of them pushed me to keep going. But I basically was just wanted to tell them that they don't understand what it is like out here, and that they've got no matter what they would say, I didn't feel like they're telling me to just suck it up and keep going. I felt like they understood it. And when I got to the bottom of Highway 93, I had pretty much made up my mind that I was done. I was going to turn into Salmon. And I called you, and you picked up, and you were there, and you said, I said, Martin, I'm not sure I'm going to keep going. I think that I'm about to just go to Salmon and end this Tour of Idaho attempt. And you said, hold on, you've come a long ways to just throw it away right now. He said, there's other ways you can go about this. You can, slow your pace, take a nap in the woods, sleep, in a bivvy overnight, or however long it takes you to just regain some energy, and you can go through this mystery section and decide that you might want to burn a bonus point if it was going to help you. And you kind of offered a way to you broke it back down into smaller segments for me, and it was just enough of an opportunity to think that all I have to do is this little bit more to keep holding on until that next day's off day, which day 8 was the off day. And I'd known day 8 was the off day the whole time, but when I was thinking about it as a 6.5 day journey ahead of me still, it felt too daunting. But when it was brought back into perspective of just hold on a little longer, find a way to make it through this next little hump, and you can still have a shot at it. And it was just enough to get me to decide to keep going on the mystery section. And as soon as I got going again, I kept chiseling away at it in small chunks, just like you guys say, to get to the end of the next trail. And every time I'd get to the end of the next trail, I'd tell myself, yeah, but I'm probably going to throw in the towel then. And as soon as I'd get there, I'd say, nah, I think I can go one more trail further. And by the end of it, I ended up riding 2 or 3 of the single track sections on the the mystery section of day 7, and then I started to say, I just had a weak moment, and I felt like I kind of needed to. I almost felt like getting angry at myself, and I decided to ride the challenge section. Just for some reason, I felt like I had energy again. I rode the challenge section, and I rode the rest of the day 7, and before long I was riding into salmon, and it felt like it was 8:30, and it wasn't that bad. I just had the wrong headspace going into it, so and had lost sight of how to chip away at the tour, and that was something that you offered just the right perspective at the right time, and got me to just go one step further, and it all started to fall into place again, and I got my head right, and made it through day 7 to that glorious off day, which was incredible. Oh my God, that off day. So thank you for being there at the right time and the right place to help me through that.
Listen, you and everybody else, almost everybody else would have told you exactly what I told you. In fact, when I was talking about it with the guys that helped me out with this, they all had exactly the same idea. Tell them just lay down and take a nap. When you take a nap, you get up, you're going to feel better. And I think it was Jeff Jensen that Jeff Jensen had one of the most pithy comments, and he said something like, an hour's worth of regret now, or 6 hours worth of regret now, a year's worth of regret later. And that was a pretty, I don't think I told you anything quite like that, but anybody that's ever done anything like this, anything that involves a lot of endurance, whether it be like a motorcycle ride like the Tour of Idaho, or a big climb, or running an ultra marathon or something like that, someplace you get into a space where it's not your body that's letting you down, it's your head that's letting you down. Yeah, you're dead tired, but what you have to do is get your mind right, like they say in Cool Hand Luke. And you just got your mind right. And not everybody can do that. You owe yourself a lot of credit for that. Most people would have turned north and gone to salmon. You didn't. You turned south and went the way you were supposed to go. That's not an easy thing to do, amigo. That's on you. You're the guy that made the decision to just, okay, let me just try to take this a bite at a time. So good on you for doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was as soon as I started moving again, and like you said, headed south instead of north, it was all in the right trend, and it started getting easier again. But it felt like it was just my morning was deteriorating, and I had all the wrong things going on and in my head. And as soon as I started riding again, I was riding great and having fun. And as soon as I looked, at the moment instead of at the big daunting, elephant of the rest of the trip, it just started. I got back into the right space. And everybody that I talked to later in that day, they said, even 6 hours later, after I had talked to them at the challenge point, they said I sounded like a different person. So it was just a headspace challenge. So, yeah, that was the hardest point in the whole tour for me. So, as soon as I got there, I started to get into a rhythm in the next days, and I rode, slower but smoother and more quickly, and I was having fun, just stopping at the whatever point I decided, and soaking it in because it seemed interesting for that moment, or shaking my hands out because they were buzzing, and I'd just sit back and recognize how cool the Tour of Idaho was that I was in the middle of. And my headspace felt right for the rest of the trip. So that was the low point, and it felt like got better from there. So day 8 was another good one. I slept in, probably got 8 hours of sleep. I had coffee for the morning, which was awesome, and bunch of food. And I got another tire put on, got my bike pressure washed, and just had a good day, kind of relaxing, and then got in early to North Fork, and got some rest and caught up for the next day. And North Fork was cool because I got to see some of the other Tour of Idaho, people that were attempting the tour on T2 in front of me. And then the following day, I got to see Team DFT when they came in, and got to chit chat with them for a little bit too, just because they were in the same hotel, and it was just fun swapping stories for the 20 or 15 minutes that we got to spend with each other. And so on day 8 was an off day. Absolutely great. I definitely recommend it if the tour is going to be 13 days again. I think
we're going to preserve it.
Yeah,
I'm not going to make you ride any trail either. Like the stuff that got burned out this year, I'm just going to leave it off. It's not that great. So there'll be a full day off in salmon from now on.
Well, it was just the carrot I needed. So anyways, day 8 was great. And then day 9 was one where I, was rested again and rode it relatively smoothly. Had on some really great trails, getting up onto the divide there, and being up in those viewpoints was pretty incredible. Really fun trails, great traction. A fresh tire was just a treat. And then got done with day 9, and Sean Smith happened to be at North Fork after he had gotten done with a 4-day ride. Apparently he was riding some of the tour, and so I got to see Sean Smith and meet him for the first time, which was so fun. Just fun to show up to the hotel and see other people that we've been watching Tour of Idaho, PBR Mondays with, and talking stories with him and hearing his tales. And it's just fun to be around people that understand what it is we're out there in the middle of doing. Speaking of which, Cass and the crew at Village at North Fork were so accommodating. Gave you this warm welcome with a custom made sign. We were Team Piedmont, so she even she Googled what Piedmont was and drew a little mountains to Piedmont to sea picture. And we got to drink a beer and ate 3 of their burritos for dinner, and it was a good night. So woke up and got to talk to Team DFT. What was it? Spencer, Mike, and Evan, and those guys were cool. So it was just generally a good night. Day 10, woke up, and day 10 was interesting because it was the ride out of Village of North Fork was the same as what Stu and I had done on our day 7, which was the morning that I had my demise. And when I woke up, I was nervous, and I was definitely a little bit, I'm not superstitious or anything, but for some reason I just felt like that trail, I was on full alert. And so I woke up early and rode the trail, and it was easier than the time Stu and I had gone through it, because we had a rain that night, and so all the brush that was already pretty heavy was leaning over the trail, and we couldn't see anything. This time I could see a bit. I found Henderson Ridge and started working my way up Henderson Ridge, which was where my bearing failed the year before. I went right past that spot, and so I said, okay, that's good. And then I got up to the Divide Trail, where I would have gone west as a 2-man route, but this year as a soloist, I was able to go take a different direction. Maybe
you go down off Irishman's Rock, and hit the road.
Yeah, so maybe I was following the same direction, but on my way up Henderson Ridge, that downfall, it was the same, almost same scenario as what had caused my problem in 2020, where there was a tree that was leaning or had fallen and was pointed almost directly at me, and you can't see much of it, and you're riding it in the dark. Your depth perception is off a little bit, and especially when it's aiming almost straight towards you, it you can't tell, what it is until it shows up at the last minute. And so I was riding uphill, and the tip of one of those burnt pines. It's just like a giant toothpick and sharp on the tip. And while I was riding, I just noticed it at the last second, and it was coming right towards me, aiming at my bike. And I had been telling myself in my head that, if you ride in the east, you brush up against saplings and trees, and stuff just springs off you, and it's soft and doesn't really make a big, impact or anything. But even the dead pine trees out here, they are stout. They're not going to give much. And, things that look like they'll snap or break and, just glance off and brush off your shoulder, they hurt. And so I had told myself, don't let anything touch you. And I had been telling myself that. And as soon as I saw that tree, I recognized how it was aiming at me. And I let go and rolled off to the side. I let go of both hands on the bars, thinking that it was going to maybe go underneath one of my arms. And I let go of the bars just in a quick reaction, and it hit the headlight mask and then went through the brake line loop. And so it was going through the brake line loop, and I rolled off the bike, and the bike, it went 6 or 8 feet through the brake line loop, and I didn't touch it, I don't think. And the bike was all, or the brake line was kind of contorted, and I got my silky saw out and sawed off the tip to relieve pressure off the brake line, and everything was okay. But I felt like I dodged a bullet that morning, because that thing was coming right for my, center body. And it seems dramatic, but it felt like I dodged what was coming for me. And as soon as that was done, I got back on the bike, and I kept plugging along, and I felt like the day was going to be smooth sailing. So I was only 5 or 6 miles from where I had broken my hand the 2 years before. And so as soon as I got past it, I felt like the rest of that day was going to be smooth. And it was. So that was day 10. Day 11 was the
That's the day where you got a lot of bonus sections you can ride.
Yeah. So day
And
11.
I think you did Wietus, right?
So I ended up deciding to somewhat follow a route that I had gotten to see Scott attempt. And Scott had gone out to Fish Butte and got the Fish Butte challenge point. And I was trying to make up an extra bonus, an extra challenge point, and put together a certain route for myself. So I rode out to Fish Butte, and then I saw where Scott had gone down Fish Butte Trail and then gotten stuck at some trees, it looked like, and he'd turned back around. So I saw his tire mark even on the trail that on Fish Butte where he had decided to turn around. And I looked at it, and I thought, I got off the bike and I hiked another 200 yards past the down tree, down the trail, and I saw that it was clear, and I said, I'm going to see if I can get around this and what would happen if I kept going. So I rode up and around it. It was a big tree, bigger than you'd chainsaw through, with a 14-inch bar. And I got up and around it and kept going. And it turned out that I was clear from trees for the rest of Fish Butte. So at that point, I ended up realizing that I had a whole section of trails that Scott probably, felt like he couldn't access due to that down tree on Fish Butte. And so I ended up riding, thinking to myself, oh, well, if you just get around a tree or two and it's, likely to be pretty clear. So I decided to go up Sherman, which as soon as I got into Sherman, I realized that I got up and around the first tree, sawed out 2 more, thinking that I was probably through it. And Sean Smith had given me the advice. He said, if you see stuff that's down in the trail, he said, there's no reason why going around it's going to be, open it up to you. And I got not taken advice on the first trail, and then I should have taken it on Sherman. And I ended up sawing through trees and jumping over logs and chucking my bike over trees for the next 3.5 or so hours to get up to the Lolo. And from the Lolo, I went back west, met a cool Forest Service employee. He told me that the construction was not a problem, and I could go back west and connect up to the Spooner route, and then took Upper Wietus Creek Trail, which was great and clear, and some of the biggest side hills, and that it was a pretty sheer drop on that one that was exciting, and got down the backside of that, and there were a couple of guys that were on four-wheelers, and they were very surprised that I had just ridden over that. They were all like, "Did you just ride that?" And I was like, "Yeah, man." They were like, "My brother told me that's unrideable," and it was like as soon as you come over it, it was like instant street cred. They thought it was pretty cool, and so I hung out with those guys and drank a beer with them for the next like hour and a bit, and they happened to have some chain lube, and they were, so we put my bike up on a stump and lubed the chain and checked my bearings and told some stories, and that was just another fun afternoon, and got into Superior, managed to get some food, and it was a good night. And then day 12 was the Spooner Hickson trail system area, and they put together an incredible day of single track. I had such a fun day riding out there. I got to the first Ridgeline Trail, a single track, right at sunup, and it was just an incredible morning, watching the sun come up while being on that ridge line and riding really, really good single track. So that was a good start to the day, and rode some great roads and somewhat relaxing, and then ended up in another section of really cool single track that was just some of the most fun. I was feeling good and enjoying it, and knowing how close I was to the finish. It was just a cherry on top kind of day. And then I ended up bumping into Ed Spooner and Jim's brother, and one of Jim's other good buddies, and they were out riding the trail. I think that they knew I was coming, and they rode the trail in reverse just to potentially bump into me. And
they're the Jeff Jensen of way up north.
Well, they asked me what the craziest thing I saw on the whole trip, and I didn't have a quick answer for them, but I think they might have been one of the craziest things I saw. I was not expecting a familiar face in the middle of the Idaho trail system. So, yeah, that was cool, Ed. I was really, really grateful to see a familiar face when I was in the middle of nowhere. That was pretty special. Looked like he was driving a freaking, Honda Goldwing or something. He's got this 7-gallon, desert tank on his bike, riding single track that's this wide. And it was pretty fun to bump into them and hear talk to them about a little bit about what I had just gotten through with, and know that they knew exactly what the Tour of Idaho was, and it was close to the end, and I was just feeling good. So that was a really fun day. Loved it. And at the end of day 12, I had watched one of your videos, and you had told me you need to go have a buffer for bonus points, and I did not. Like you said, I did not want to go back for that bonus point. Well, I didn't.
And you skipped the easy one to do the hard one, you knucklehead.
Well, I didn't get the message until like 2 in the afternoon when I was past all of them. So I
told you the day before, make sure you ride the first bonus. And you were so insistent that, no, man, I'm good. I added it all up. It's all good.
Well, I ended up going back and doing it, and I rode the hard one, and I did it not the easy way. I did it in a long way. I was about 30 minutes from a steak dinner at Wallace, and then I added the the bonus at the end of the day. And
Oh God, that one's terrible too. That trail has got some of the slickest side hill on the planet on it.
yeah, I remember Ed, or not Ed, Jim saying, laughing and chuckling about side hilling through bear grass, and I was like, "What's bear grass?" And I found out what bear grass was up there. So that was pretty good trail at the end of the day. It's just not what I was thinking I wanted. I wanted a steak and potato, but got through it, and then woke up, had a hot meal at a diner in Wallace instead of the steak breakfast. I got up and got the 6:30 a.m. steak and egg breakfast, and got on the road and cruised into. I had a couple navigation challenges and had to do a little extra loop and things, but I was almost forgetting that I had some work to do on day 13, and I was almost just cruising through all the challenge points, and my head was on Sundance, and finally I got through to Sundance, and my dad was waiting there, which was pretty exciting. That was really fun to have somebody there that he was probably my biggest fan in the middle of the whole tour of Idaho. He thinks this whole thing's really cool. He wishes he could be watching this tonight, but he was there at Sundance and had picked my truck up from the airport in American Falls where Jake had driven it to, and drove up there, and it was a pretty cool night. So got to celebrate with a PBR and family, and had a lot of support from. One thing I'll also say is I had a lot of support the whole time during this tour of Idaho, not just from you and my friends, but the Tour of Idaho group. There were people chiming in that were encouraging me, that I had heard, a little bit from ever before, but everybody was really helpful in pushing me through it. So best friends were all involved, and that helped my headspace a lot. And getting to Sundance was pretty incredible. So yeah, it's been the last week and a half just kind of thinking back on it, and all the little problems that show up in your day to day after the Tour of Idaho. You kind of, nothing seems very significant, and everything seems easily manageable. And the Tour of Idaho is a good training, effort for your ability to tackle all the little things that come at you in a day to day. And the thing I'll say is that the one thing about Tour of Idaho that's the toughest or most demanding is that in the whole 13 days, with the exception of the off day, it feels like your direction and effort, you can't let off, you can't waver in your determination to get it done very much, if ever, during that whole time. Because even a 3-hour spell that you decide to sit down and not ride, or your body's telling you not to ride, and if you give in and decide that you don't want to keep pushing, it doesn't take but a few hours to cost you the whole trip. And you pretty much have that whole 13 days, you've got one thing on your mind, and it's making progress and riding the Tour of Idaho. So that was something that is hard to compare to anything else.
Well, that's an epic tale. It was an epic trip. We're a little bit over right now, so I'm going to let you take it out, too. Is there just anything else you want to tell everybody? I'm sorry, I got something in my eye, which is why I've been fiddling with my glasses. But take us out. You got everybody here. Tell them anything else you want to tell them. No,
just thanks for everybody's time and for listening, and thanks for all the encouragement during the trip. It was great to meet the people I met, and hear from everybody that chimed in and wanted to encourage me along the way. So hope to ride with all of you. Hope to ride with all you guys someday in the future. If you ever want to link up with me. I'm in Oregon, so glad to be part of the community. Thanks so much, Martin. I really appreciate you putting it on. It was awesome. I'm gonna never forget it.
Well, when guys like you show up, it makes it all worthwhile. I've been telling the guys sort of in our little pro group that I'm amazed at how these guys that show up, you and Jake have absolutely no fat anywhere on your frames. You guys are the leanest dudes I've ever seen in my life. And I said, those guys together probably weigh 100 pounds soaking wet. But I would put those two skinny rascals up against every tap out hat wearing rascal out there. You would whip their butts. The determination that you showed and that Jake showed. I mean, he showed me his hand when he got here, and his whole forearm was swollen up. And it's on his throttle hand, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The determination that you showed, just get beat down day after day after day after day, and you kept on going and you made it, dude. Salute. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be part of it, and it's tough. There's nothing else that really gets you prepared for it, but lots of little things prepare you. But yeah, Jake's a tough nut, man. He didn't complain. He just told me it was a problem, but it wasn't a complaint. It was just something he was making me aware of as a partner. So no matter how tough it was, he was right there next to me, and it just bad luck went his way. And I'm hoping that maybe he's interested in making a shot at it again next year.
Well, if he comes back next year, he's pre-approved. He's welcome back. It's too bad what happened to him, and he wasn't feeling very good when he got here. His disappointment was palpable, but you made it, and you waited a long time. I know that it was tough on you a couple of years ago when you had to drop out, and you and I talked about that through the PLBs, and I know you didn't want to do it. You would have kept going if there had been any physical way possible, but you made the right call there. A lot of people don't. And, you waited a couple of years, and now it's all yours, man. So congratulations, number 93.
Nice. Officially 93.
Officially 93.
Yeah, I was glad to come back and knock it off. It was kind of the thing that if I didn't come back for it, it was always going to be lingering on my head. And I'm glad that this attempt went a little bit better. And I'm hopeful that Jake wants to get back out here and ride again in Idaho, even if it's just another trip. So I want to show it to him real bad. And had a blast on the trip. Thanks so much.
Well, you're welcome so much. All right. I'm gonna take Dylan out here. Thank you once again, Dylan, for joining us, and I'll be talking to you soon, okay?
See you guys. Thanks so much.
Take care, brother. All right. So there it have it. One of the best tales ever. And again, it's just remarkable every year, the people that come through and, they do this thing and it's hard, but they don't forget about it. It's not the kind of adventure that you forget a week after you did it. I was talking to Michael Knight and Brent Carlson a while back, and they said, they think about this every day. I think about it every day, and it's been 6 years since I did my last tour. The fellow that called me earlier today said he and his partner not only think about it, but they talk about it every day. And it's just remarkable that, we all kind of built this thing and it works that way. Well, once again, you've wasted another hour and 18 minutes of your life with one complete knucklehead and then one guy that actually had something useful to tell you. Thanks a lot for doing it. Next week, I'm going to get those guys in DFT in here. And, man, they have a hell of a story to tell. Nobody with more skill has ever shown up to do the Tour of Idaho. It shows in the way they wrote it. Their tracks are awesome to look at. It was a pretty smooth trip, and I haven't talked to those guys that much myself, except the communication that we had through the PLBs. But I'm really looking forward to next week to listen to the DFT tell their story, and I hope that all three of them can join us. So I'm going to do what you're going to do here in a minute. I'm going to check and see where our friends in Port Seguin de Vez are, and hopefully they should be close to the flagpole if they're not already here. But I will be seeing the rest of you next week. Once again, thanks a lot for an hour of your life. Cheers.